si je te tuais, t'as pas du tout. Ouais, j'ai fait. Après, ça va bien. J'ai vu qu'on s'arrête avec la situation. Bien qu'on j'ai mis le masque quand tu fais un événement et que tu fais d'événement. Ouais, c'est clair. Comme Steve Jobs au Minecraft, au moins, t'es plus t'as un plan, hein. Parce que là, tu commences à participer. Ouais, puis après, ça se voit aussi. Si t'as mis ouais, ok.
Complètement.
C'est vrai qu'il y a aussi de la charge à tout. Ah, c'est bon.
Oui.
Also gerade umso stärker.
Ja. Non, bah, j'ai une intentionnelle parce que je pense pas que c'est
C'est ça.
Il a le droit d'arriver en retard ou pas? Ouais, on peut arriver en retard, c'est 14h07.
En plus, c'est suisse et tout. Il va pas avoir
On peut lui interdire la scène s'il est pas là.
Écoute, j'ai déjà vu que la session de ce soir de Saillot, il y avait 18h20 ou 18h. J'ai un petit agenda et on a glissé.
Alors moi, elle m'a déjà dit 18h20 hier.
Ouais, ok.
Enfin, même avant-hier, quand on a passé mon badge, elle m'a dit...
Oui, donc ça avait tout tard et ça avait déjà eu.
Ah bah voilà. Pas où là? Sorry.
Monsieur le Président, bonjour. Comment allez-vous? Ça va? Est-ce que le président américain...
Je ne vais pas faire une interview en marchant sur des choses sérieuses.
Est-ce que le président américain nous unit?
Le point de non-retour a été atteint avec
Merci à tous.
Les dialogues avec Trump ne sont pas possibles.
Does Europe need a stronger response to America? Merci. Hey, hey, hey.
Hey, hey. Yes.
Le pool, vous avez besoin d'aller à l'intérieur?
Non.
Non, ah, vous restez... Ah, bah, tant mieux.
I'm going to get started. Welcome, everybody. Mr. President, welcome. I've been visiting France for more than 50 years. I know I don't look it, but truly so. And over that time, I've been passionate about visiting France, understanding it, learning about it, learning from it. But mostly I've been passionate about the debates we have related to the French economy, and importantly, the French's future of France. What's striking to me about these debates, the debates have actually changed. And the debates have changed over the last decade. Today, I think there's a broad agreement around one single idea, that economic growth matters. Economic growth, as it broadens, reduces polarization. I think that sounds obvious now about the need for economic growth, but not so long ago. It was still an open question whether competitiveness would truly sit at the center of France's economic vision. I think that question has been answered, and President Emmanuel Macron has been the key man driving that shift and answering that question. In fact, you could make an argument that no French leader has led his country at a more pivotal time since World War II. From the onset, President Macron has argued that France must strengthen itself. It must strengthen its defense. It must renew itself in its capacity to innovate, but also importantly, and maybe more importantly today than ever before, and remain engaged in the world. That perspective has defined his presidency and is one that is helping to shape the conversation, the needed conversation about Europe's future. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the President of the French Republic, Emmanuel Macron.
Thank you very much, Larry, for your words. Your Majesties, distinguished heads of state and governments, President Lagarde, ministers, ambassadors, business leaders, ladies and gentlemen. I'm extremely happy to be here, and it's great to be here, as the Financial Times would say. And it's a time of peace, stability, and predictability. So let's try to address the key challenge of this world in a few minutes' time. But it's clear that we are reaching a time of instability, of imbalances, both from the security and defense point of view and the economic point of view. Look at the situation where we are. I mean, a shift towards autocracy against democracy, more violence, more than 60 wars in 2024, an absolute record, even if I understood a few of them were fixed. And conflict has become normalized, hybrid, expanding into new domains, space, digital, information, cyber, trade, and so on. It's as well a shift towards a world without rules, where international law is trampled underfoot, and where the only law that seems to matter is that of the strongest, and imperial ambitions are resurfacing. Obviously, the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine, which will enter into its 4th year next month, and conflicts continue in the Middle East and across Africa. This is as well a shift towards a world without effective collective governance, and where multilateralism is weakened by powers that obstruct it or turn away from it, and rules are undermined. And I can multiply the examples of international bodies weakened or left by the key economies. And when we look at the situation, it's clearly a very concerning time, because we are killing the structure where we can fix the situation and the common challenges we have. Without collective governance, cooperation gives way to relentless competition. Competition from the United States of America through trade agreements that undermine our export interests, demand maximum concessions, and openly aim to weaken and subordinate Europe, combined with an endless accumulation of new tariffs that are fundamentally unacceptable, even more so when they are used as leverage against territorial sovereignty. And competition from China, where massive excess capacities or distortive practices threaten to overwhelm entire industrial and commercial sectors. Export control has become more dangerous new tools, destabilizing global trade and the international system. And the answer, in order to fix this issue, is more cooperation and building new approaches. And it's clearly building more economic sovereignty and strategic autonomy, especially for the Europeans, which is for me the core answer. In this context, I want to exclude two approaches. The first approach would be to, I would say, to passively accept the law of the strongest, leading to vassalization and bloc politics. I think accepting a sort of new colonial approach doesn't make sense. And all the head of state and government and business leaders, which would be too complacent with such an approach, will take a huge responsibility. The second will be to adopt a purely moral posture, limiting ourselves to commentary. That path would condemn us to marginalization and powerlessness. Faced with the brutalization of the world, France and Europe must defend an effective multilateralism because it serves our interests and those of all who refuse to submit to the rule of force. And for me, the two answers are, on one side, more sovereignty and more autonomy for the Europeans. On the other side, an efficient multilateralism to deliver results through cooperation. Obviously, France and Europe are attached to national sovereignty and independence, to the United Nations and to its charter. And it's not an old-fashioned way to live multilateralism. It's just not to totally forget what we learned from the Second World War and remain committed to cooperation. And this is also because of those principles that we have decided to join the mutual exercise in Greenland without threatening anyone, but just supporting an ally and another European country, Denmark. Facing this order and this new situation, this year France holds the G7 presidency with a clear ambition to restore the G7 as a forum for frank dialogue among major economies and for collective and cooperative solutions. Trade wars, protectionist escalation, races towards overproduction will only produce losers. This is why addressing global economic imbalances is our key priority. And if we look at the situation, the current imbalances are due to some key phenomena, and we all have to deliver our own agenda. This includes American overconsumption, Chinese underconsumption and overinvestment, and European underinvestment and lack of competitiveness. And these imbalances are also reflected in development gaps, by the way, and we can no longer settle for aid that neither delivers sufficient results nor enables countries to escape poverty. So our objective through the G7 is to demonstrate that the world's major powers are still capable of reaching a shared diagnosis of the global economy and committing to concrete actions. Cooperating is not about blaming others. It is about assuming one's share of responsibility and contributing to solutions. So the objective of this G7 will be to build this framework of cooperation in order to fix the roots of these imbalances and restore efficient convergence and cooperation through multilateral frameworks. And the other objective is as well to build bridges and more cooperations with the emerging countries, the BRICS and the G20, because the fragmentation of this world would not make sense. Here, this point is for, I would say, the global agenda and how our G7 agenda. On the other side, we have the European answer. And for me, Europe clearly has to fix its key issues: the lack of growth, the lack of GDP per capita growth, and the three pillars of our strategy in order to deliver more sovereignty, more efficiency and more growth would be based on protection, simplification and investment. Because the diagnosis is well known, European competitiveness still lags behind that of the US, and in the current global order, facing precisely the Chinese approach, we have to react. So first, protection. Protection doesn't mean protectionism. But today's Europeans are too naive. This is the unique market open to everybody without checking level playing field. Nobody can access the Chinese market as people are accessing the European market for sure. But even if you take the US and a lot of other countries, the level of protection does exist for investment and trade. And the Europeans are the only one not to protect their own companies and their own markets when the other countries doesn't respect level playing field. This is why we have to be much more realistic if we want to protect our chemical industry, our industry, from the automotive sectors to a lot of others, because they are being literally killed by the lack of respect of a normal framework and level playing field. Europe has very strong tools now, and we have to use them when we are not respected and when the rules of the game are not respected, by the way. The anti-coercion mechanism is a powerful instrument, and we should not hesitate to deploy it in today's tough environment. We must also advance the principle of European preference. There is a North American preference in your market. There is no European preference today. We are progressively creating it, and in the latest documents and decisions taken by the decisions, we do have the first examples of that, but this is extremely good. And we are currently aligning closely with Germany to deliver an ambitious and simple framework. And this is a decisive project, and I count on the European Commission to present a proposal as well by early 2026 with the highest possible level of ambition in order to deliver, I would say, across the different sectors, the principle of European preference. This is a necessity. We must act on imports as well regarding this protection issue, powerful instruments, and we should not hesitate to deploy it in today's tough environment. We must also advance the principle of European preference. There is a North American preference in your market. There is no European preference today. We are progressively creating it, and in the latest documents and decisions taken by the decisions, we do have the first examples of that, but this is extremely good. And we are currently aligning closely with Germany to deliver an ambitious and simple framework. And this is a decisive project, and I count on the European Commission to present a proposal as well by early 2026 with the highest possible level of ambition in order to deliver, I would say, across the different sectors, the principle of European preference. This is a necessity. We must act on imports as well regarding this protection issue. And in the context of escalating trade tensions and Asian overcapacities, Europe must strengthen its trade defense instruments, including mirror measures to enforce regulatory standards, and we must improve the quality and added value of foreign direct investments, targeting projects with strong export potential. And this is core for the rebalancing with China. China is welcome, but what we need is more Chinese foreign direct investment in Europe in some key sectors to contribute to our growth, to transfer some technologies, and not just to export towards Europe some devices or products which sometimes don't have the same standards or are much more subsidized as the one being produced in Europe. It's not being protectionist, it's just restoring this level playing field and protecting our industry. So from safeguard clauses to mirror clauses to European preferences and incentives for more FDIs, this strategy is absolutely key. And in parallel, protecting our economies will also require a resilient strategy on both import and exports to de-risk supply chains, particularly for raw materials, rare earths, semiconductors, chips, and to diversify our trade partners. The second pillar of the European economy and the European strategy should be simplification. And when I speak about simplification, we started with CSRD, CSDDD, and we have to do much more on different sectors, and we did it during the past few weeks on automotive, and we have to do it on chemical, digital, AI, banking, and so on. And the core of this simplification is sometimes to get rid of some recent regulations when they desynchronize in a certain way the European Union in comparison with the rest of the world. But we have as well to accelerate the deepening of the single market. On all these sectors, the 450 million inhabitants and consumers market should be the domestic market of all the EU companies. It's not yet the case as long as you have complexities. In doing so, we must ensure respect technological neutrality and non-discrimination within the European Union. This is another pillar, another point of simplification. Neutral approach in terms of technology and non-discrimination. We discriminate during such a long time between the different sources of energies. It's counterproductive for the Europeans themselves. Companies have a role to play, and we must act, and you must act. And clearly, you must help identify and concretely help us to simplify where it is needed. But for me, this agenda of simplification is not a matter of discussion, but just implementation, speed and scale. The third pillar of the European strategy for more competitiveness and more autonomy is based on investment and innovation. We have to invest much more. If there is a GDP per capita so different between the US and Europe, 65% to 70% of the explanation is due to the difference in terms of innovation. And the US was much more innovative because of public and private investment. So in our budget for the months to come, because we will negotiate during the years, this year in Europe, we have to invest much more money in the critical sectors where the innovation will be made. AI, quantic, green tech, but as well defense and security. The size of our common budget is not the right one. We have to invest much more money in order to be much more credible and accelerate this innovation agenda. But at the same time, if you look at the situation, we don't have sufficient private investment. And this is one of the main differences. We do have the savings as the Europeans, much more than the US, by the way. But this saving is overinvested in bonds and sometimes in equities, but outside Europe. So this is why the top priority should be securitization program. It is prepared, we have to accelerate the implementation. And second, capital market union. Precisely in order to have more integration and simplification, but to have an efficient capital market union in order to invest much more money and use our savings to be invested on innovation and equity in Europe. This agenda for me is our top priority, both the global and the European one. And it is to be implemented in the months to come, because everything is about acceleration. And France is committed to deliver this agenda. We work very closely with our key partner. And at the same time, our objective for France is to stabilize our results and our macro approach, and to remain the highly attractive country we are. We've been the most attractive country of Europe during the past 6 years, and to consolidate our deep structural reforms and our key advantage. And on top of the business framework we have, I want here to insist on the fact that we have a competitive, stable, low-carbon electricity supply. We exported last year 90 terawatt-hours of electricity, and a low-carbon one, based on our nuclear model. We have world-class innovation and research capabilities, and we will improve them. And we have one of the most vivid and active ecosystem in AI, quantum computing, energy transition, etc., and a lot of the startups and unicorns and large caps of these sectors are with me in my delegation today. And on top of that, let me insist, and I will stop here, on the fact that we have a high-quality infrastructure and large market with strong purchasing power. And we have a place where rule of law and predictability is still the rule of the game. And my guess is that it is largely underpriced by the market. And beyond what you can do in terms of investment, what you can do in terms of strong ambitions, having a place like Europe, which sometimes is too slow, for sure, and needs to be reformed, for sure, but which is predictable, loyal, and where you know that the rule of the game is just the rule of law, it's a good place. And I think this is a good place for today and for tomorrow. So we will be committed during 2026 to try to deliver this global agenda in order to fix global imbalances through more cooperations. And we will do our best in order to have a stronger Europe, much stronger, and more autonomous, based on the pillars I just mentioned, and based as well, and we can revert in the dialogue, but on more investment and commitments on defense and security, because we have to invest much more and invest much more. Because we do believe, and here in the epicenter of this continent, we do believe that we need more growth, we need more stability in this world, but we do prefer respect to bullies, we do prefer science to plotism, and we do prefer rule of law to brutality. You're welcome in Europe, and you are more than welcome to France.
President, what I'd really like to ask you is, how's your last few days been? But importantly, though, you framed out an economic direction for France and for Europe. If you had to prioritize to transform France and Europe as fast as possible, you close saying, yes, we are slow, yes, but what can we do right now to really accelerate it, to broaden the economies across Europe, that we have more participants? Is there any one silver bullet that you could do to really accelerate that type of growth?
I don't think there is one silver bullet, but I think on the very short run, given the situation in some critical sectors, I think the European preference is a necessity because we are desynchronized with the others. And the second one is clearly a big bunch of simplification. The 28th regime, which is being prepared by the Commission, and the deepening of the single market is key. And this is why I insisted on capital market union. I think if we deliver European preference and capital market union, here are two game changers.
Well, you know, I've been talking about the capital market union in Europe as one of the major hindrances compared to the US. And so, yes, but I do believe, as we witnessed starting last year, and we're starting to see it accelerate this year, you're starting to see more international flows coming back to Europe. And so that is beginning, and so I do believe that will accelerate. But in terms of priorities, if you had to tell the Commission, what should they be more swift in terms of transforming Europe faster, so it can compete with the US, compete with Europe, and exceed China and Europe, China and the US?
Look, I think this is the discussion we have clearly with the Commission. We will have an informal summit in February focused on this topic. Everything was largely drafted by both Letta and Draghi's reports and is well known. I think the difference is that Draghi was before China surpluses vis-à-vis Europe. I mean, we should not underestimate the fact that 2025, for the very first time,
$1 trillion.
Yeah, China has such a surplus vis-à-vis the rest of the world, 1/3 vis-à-vis the US, 1/3 Europe, 1/3 the rest of the world.
But it was $1 trillion. It was bigger than any other time.
Yeah, and for the first time, the deficit between Germany and China was a trade deficit for Germany. And this is a game changer for Europe. So this is why, clearly for me, we have to fix this issue. And second, it's about the tariffs. So if I have to tell you what could change the game and our approach for all of us in the year to come, for me it would be a bunch of simplification with all this omnibus package for the Commission, sector by sector, European preference, capital market union, and dismantling of the tariff between US and Europe. Because in such a context, what doesn't make sense is to have tariffs between allies.
Right.
We have to fix the war in Ukraine. We have to help the Ukrainians to resist and find a sustainable peace. We have to fix prosperity in democracies. I mean, it doesn't make sense to have tariffs and be divided, and even to threaten now with additional tariffs. We can use the crazy thing is that we can be put in a situation to use the anti-coercion mechanism for the very first time vis-à-vis the US if they put additional tariffs. Can you imagine that? This is crazy. I do regret that, but this is a consequence of just unpredictability and useless aggressivity. So what we have to do is to remain very calm, all of us. We have such an agenda with so many opportunities and so many challenges. So let's be focused on peace in Europe. Everybody should be focused to help the Ukrainians to have a sustainable peace. Level playing field and fixing the issues and these imbalances with China, because it's an issue for the Europeans and the Americans. And third, let's be focused on more competitiveness in Europe and this big acceleration, full stop.
Throughout the sessions today, and I think during the week, AI is going to be the dominant conversation. And the question is, how does AI develop in Europe? I know there was one conversation already being held on that. What is your vision of AI for France specifically?
Look, we are strong believer, and 1 year ago we organized this AI summit in Paris, and we are one of the most vibrant ecosystems in Europe. We really believe and we are committed on AI because we really think that this is a game changer, not just in terms of productivity precisely and growth, but I mean because this is a true revolution. We have assets in order to do so.
You have a grid and you have power too.
We have power.
And a grid.
And low carbon energy. Yeah. No need to have new, coal plants and/or oil production in order to deliver the capacities for AI. I mean, this is important. We have 90 terawatt-hour available for more AI activities. We have a national grid, super pilotable. Third, we have available capacities for more data centers and computing capacities. And we are delivering the agenda announced 1 year ago. So we are building these capacities, and Europe was lagging behind the US and others on this field. We have talents, very good data scientists, mathematicians, and so on, and we are increasing our training programs and our capacities, and we have several hubs being identified. And we have a critical ecosystem with LLM champions, but as well, we have a startup on AI and quantum, I don't forget them, which are extremely present in all these different fields. One of the best evidence of the attractiveness and this vibrant ecosystem is that Jan LeCun I mean, when he decided to leave Meta and set up his own company, established it in France.
Right.
A few weeks ago, which is for me a good evidence.
Big win.
A big win, and we will do our best to help him to work. This is a global company, but incorporated in France and established in France with these talents. So we have all these assets. But what is important for me now is to invest, to help all the startups and the companies in this sector to do much more and to increase, but to do my best in order to make sure that their domestic market is the EU market and not just the French one.
Right.
And when we speak about strengthening the single market, this is this point. And this is a game changer, because it means your domestic market is not just 68 million inhabitants, but 450 million. It's super important.
And it's important for Europe to have that unified grid, which it does not have yet.
Exactly.
So, with our remaining time, is there any one message that you really want to push over the course of your remaining term that really will resonate, not just resonate for France, but resonate for the world?
Look, I really believe that we are in these very challenging times, and you mentioned some of these challenges in your speech. I did in mind, and then unhappily we were even not totally complete. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, we see the level of investment in this world, in the current environment, and the ongoing revolution. This level of investment has no comparison with what happened during the past years, not to say decades. So my main message would be, let's not be shy. Let's not be divided. Let's not accept a global order which will be decided by those who claim to have I would say, the bigger voice or the bigger stick or the bigger one, I don't know. But let's focus on just common interests and common challenges. We know what we have to fix: growth, peace, climate. And we should not forget climate in this current agenda. We want peace, we want growth, we want climate. And investment, innovation, everything should be dedicated to fix these three issues. And in order to fix these three issues, let's focus on the key investments, the key innovation, but our ability to cooperate as well. And let's be clear, Davos was founded for restoring a global discussion, having a global discussion between business leaders, but as well governments and so on. A global discussion is a discussion where everybody is respected and where you provide an improvement and a way forward for every place and every people in this world. This is the only way to make it sustainable. And I think this is the right way to do. And even if this is less present in the global debate today, we should focus much more on this approach. More cooperation, and let's focus on our key challenge to deliver peace, prosperity, and decarbonization of our economies for our fellow citizens. This is our duty as business leaders, as head of states and governments, and we have everything in order to deliver this agenda. Just let's be coordinated. Let's not waste time with crazy ideas. Let's not open Pandora box or new topics. And it's not a time for new imperialism or new colonialism. This is a time of cooperation in order to fix these three global challenges for our fellow citizens. Full stop.
We ran out of time. I want to thank the President of the Republic of France, Emmanuel Macron, for his wisdom, but most importantly, for your humanity and your leadership.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Larry. I appreciate it.
through drill, baby, drill, has gotten gasoline prices down. We're below $2 in many states. National average is below $3, even if you throw in the outlier of California. And so that we can get down. And we are working every day to get things down. And affordability is two pieces. Affordability is price level, but it's real incomes. Real incomes have gone up every month since President Trump took office. And as I said, I think we're going to see a big year for real incomes this year.
Wow, and you said in terms of the tax refunds, are we talking about thousands of dollars that people will be getting as a result?
We could see, for working families, for each wage earner, we could see up to $1,000 per wage earner.
Okay. You said that prices are still coming down, but they're still elevated. The president announced many things, a litany of things, just in the last 100 days. And I want you to walk through some of these things and tell us why they're important, because he put a ban on large institutional investors purchasing single-family homes. He asked for $200 billion purchases of mortgage-backed securities, and he put on a proposal for a 10% cap on credit card interest rates. We know credit card interest rates are always soaring, up to 28, 30% in some cases. That's going to cut into earnings of the bank, certainly. And he also teased something about 401ks, that you would be able to tap into your 401k to then buy a home. Walk us through these things. Why are these so key, in your view, to growth and to reining in prices?
Well, here, why don't we start from the beginning? So,
the first thing was the ban on large institutional investors purchasing single-family homes and the purchase of mortgage-backed securities.
Yep. So the ban on institutional investors in single-family homes, for those of you who are not American, in the U.S., pre-Great Financial Crisis, institutional investors did not participate in the single-family market. So post the financial crisis, institutional investors hoovered up single-family homes. They continue to do it, and there's an unfair tax arbitrage there. You and I have a mortgage. We can deduct the mortgage amount. Institutional investors can deduct the borrowing amount, but they can also expense any repairs and depreciation. So we think that it is a good idea to have them out of the market. We are going to give guidance at some point to see what is a mom and pop, that someone, maybe your parents for their retirement, have bought 5, 10, 12 homes. So we don't want to push the mom and pops out. We just want to push everyone else out. And what's important here, you will hear some misinformation that says, well, institutional investors are 1, 2, 3%. That is true. Having been in markets for 35 or 40 years, markets are made on the margin, and institutional investors are much higher in boomtown markets like Charlotte, like Atlanta, like Huntsville, Alabama. So they've done that. In terms of having Fannie and Freddie buy MBS, the mortgages are two parts. It is the 10-year bond yield, and it is the spread between mortgages and the 10-year yield. So the purpose of that is to narrow the spread.
Okay. The cap on credit card rates is expected to cut into bank earnings between 5 and 18%. Your reaction?
We've done a lot this year. Bank stocks are at a new high. That through my position on FSOC, the Financial Stability Oversight Council, and the 3 bank regulators, the Federal Reserve, the OCC, the FDIC, we have done a lot to deregulate banks. Their earnings are way up. More importantly, it has increased their lending capacity. Oliver Wyman's numbers, not mine, estimates that there's $2.5 trillion of extra lending capacity. The other thing that has been a focus of this administration and a focus of mine is small and community banks, because what happened after the great financial crisis, all the regulations from Dodd-Frank, we had too big to fail, but then with small banks, you were too small to succeed. This regulatory morass, we have lost more than 50% of the small and community banks. And they power small business lending, real estate lending and ag lending. So we are trying to bring that back.
Yeah, it's a great point because farmers really need the lending of these small community banks. Look, Secretary, I want to get your take overall on your thoughts on what you've done so far, because the president back last year, right after the inauguration, I sat down with the president and I asked him what he wants the economy to look like in 4 years when he's done. And he was very clear. He said he wants private enterprise to rule the day. 1 year later, you've taken a 10% stake in Intel. You've taken a stake in MP. Now, I know that these are national security issues. And the other day, the president told the defense contractors, don't pay dividends, don't buy back any of your stock. You need to be fulfilling what the country needs in terms of producing weapons. So what do you want to say to people who say, look, here is a so-called capitalist president and a Treasury Secretary, and yet it's not private enterprise running things. The president is telling the defense contractors what to do, and you've taken stakes in these companies.
A couple of things, Maria. I think the only good thing that came from COVID was it was a test run for what would happen if our supply chains were ever broken due to a kinetic war. So we saw that there are 5, 6, 7 key industries that we have to reshore. So everything you just said, rare earth magnets, we've got to get out from under China's grasp. The semiconductors, I would say that the single biggest threat to the world economy, the single biggest point of single failure is that 97% of the high-end chips are made in Taiwan. If that island were blockaded, that capacity were destroyed, it would be an economic apocalypse. So we are reshoring the semiconductor industry to the U.S. With the defense contractors are no different than the systemically important banks. They exist, like the systemically important banks exist because of the backstop from the Fed, because of the regulations, and these defense contractors have let down the American people. They have let down the American people. They are 5, 6, 7 years behind on fulfillment of their contracts, and they exist because of the U.S. Department of War. So I do not think it is unreasonable to tell them that until further notice, you need to build more factories and buy back less stock. And by the way, Maria, these CEOs making $30, $50 million a year for failing the American people. So I don't see any discrepancy there. And it's, as you said, everything on your list is national defense. And so once they get to some normalized level of backlog, I don't know whether it's 2 years, 3 years, then we can talk about removing those restrictions.
So what you're saying is you want private enterprise to lead the day, but when it comes to national security, the government will be a shareholder.
And again, a lot of this isn't private. You know, we have seen what happens when the free markets get kind of perverted, because what happens with critical minerals, that several companies have tried to stand up critical minerals facilities in the U.S., and the Chinese come, lower price, undercut them, and then they're bankrupt. So we are going to put in a system, price floor, price ceilings, and when you talk about multilateralism and the U.S. leading, I just hosted at Treasury last Monday the G7++, so G7 plus Australia, plus India, plus Mexico, plus South Korea, and we are working at warp speed to create a critical minerals block where we can mine, process, and refine critical minerals, and China won't have this sword over our heads.
So how long do you think it will be until the United States is, in fact, independent in terms of the refinement of these minerals, independent in terms of oil, et cetera? I mean, I know that the U.S. is the largest producer anyway, but do you expect this year, next year, what's your timetable in terms of the U.S. not relying on China for these things?
Well, obviously for energy, we are independent. We're an energy superpower, and I would say 18 to 24 months. I went down about 2 months ago to my home state of South Carolina, and in South Carolina, for the first time in 25 years, there's a producer there who made rare earth magnets. So they are starting to come off the supply chain. They believe that within 2 years, they can fulfill most of the rare earth magnet needs for the U.S. And then we also want to help our allies because the supply chain is important.
Mm-hmm. What do you want to say about sanctions, something else you've been working on, of course? What are you planning there in terms of Iran and the impact there? Do sanctions actually work? And the same question with regard to 500% secondary sanctions or tariffs on countries who purchase energy products from Russia.
Okay, so two things there. There are Treasury sanctions. And if you look at a speech that I gave at the Economic Club of New York last March, I said that I believe the Iranian currency was on the verge of collapse, that if I were an Iranian citizen, I would take my money out. President Trump ordered Treasury and our OFAC division, Office of Foreign Asset Control, to put maximum pressure on Iran, and it's worked. Because in December, their economy collapsed. We saw a major bank go under. The central bank has started to print money. There is a dollar shortage. They are not able to get imports, and this is why the people took to the street. So this is economic statecraft. No shots fired, and things are moving in a very positive way here. On the 500% tariffs on the buyers of Russian oil, that is a proposal that Senator Graham has in front of the Senate, and we will see whether that passes. We don't believe that President Trump needs that authority, that he can do it under IEEPA, but that the Senate wants to give him that authority. And just to be clear, that we have Europe buying Russian oil still 4 years later, they are financing the war against themselves. India started buying Russian oil after the conflict began, but President Trump put a 25% tariff on them, and India has geared down and has stopped buying Russian oil. And then 3, China is a very large buyer of Russian oil, as they are of Iranian oil, as they were of Venezuelan oil. But guess what, Maria? No more Venezuelan oil for them.
So would you treat China the same as the others in terms of buying Russian oil with regard to tariffs and sanctions?
Well, we'll see what happens with this Senate bill and with the Iranian oil. That'll be up to President Trump.
Secretary, what do you want to say about artificial intelligence and the idea that AI efficiencies will likely kill jobs? A lot of people are worried about jobs. Do we have a plan in the U.S. government right now in terms of job creation in the face of AI efficiency killing jobs?
Well, Maria, we are seeing the record factory groundbreakings. That's why President Trump wants to bring back these precision jobs to the U.S. And historically, every productivity boom has led to job growth. Now, can there be some toing and froing in terms of people changing professions? I can't remember what the number is. Maybe you know it. 50, 60% of the professions today didn't exist 30 years ago.
Well, it's a big number. With technology.
It's a big number, but it's something we're very cognizant of. We haven't seen it in the numbers yet. I think that it could be very different than what we saw with the China shock. The China shock was a blue-collar phenomenon. My guess is the AI shock might be a white-collar phenomenon. We'll see.
Secretary, as we wrap up here, a moment ago, you said, look, you've been dealing with markets for a long time, your entire career. What do you think of markets today? I mean, the market has been rallying on the president's policy. Today, of course, we're seeing a sell-off. But do you think the markets are getting it right in terms of rallying on the president's policies going into this Davos meeting?
I try not to the extent I had success in the markets, it was not making short-term predictions. But I can tell you what has been very heartening for me. I don't have time to follow the markets as closely, but to the extent last year before, everyone said, oh, this is just Mag 7 stocks, it's not healthy. We've seen a big broadening out in the market. The Russell index of smaller cap stocks has outperformed. The S&P equal weight has outperformed. And I actually think that that speaks to the economic recovery. You know, we're seeing it across all sectors. Our friend Ed Hyman at ISI does these corporate surveys. Corporate surveys are the highest that they've been since June 22. And I think you're starting to see it in all sectors of the market. And the market follows the economy. And again, I just think that we have the best place in the world. Come, build your factory, you have tax certainty, you have regulatory certainty, and you have energy certainty.
And of course, deregulation. And that was one point that I wanted to make before we wrap up here, that Mario Draghi wrote a report 2 years ago about regulation in Europe, and the fact that the largest market cap company in Europe is Novo Nordisk because of Ozempic, about $400 billion or so. And we just saw NVIDIA in the United States hit $5 trillion.
Well, clearly, Maria, the innovation, the change, and the ability to adapt is in the U.S. The U.S. is the innovation capital of the world. I don't think anything's going to change that. I was just asked in another meeting by some business leaders, what advice would you give to Europe? And I said I would operationalize the Draghi report, because the EU was supposed to cut down on red tape, but it is logarithmically increased it. When I talk to tech executives, they will tell me it is easier doing business in China than the EU.
Wow.
That's not a great stat. I had a European businessman come to see me the other day. He said, Secretary Bessent, it took me 3 days to get an appointment with the White House and with you. It took me 90 days to get an appointment with Ursula von der Leyen, and we are one of the largest employers in Europe. So there's just a different mindset here, and I think the mindset has got to change. It's got to change to a growth mentality, and that's President Trump's invitation is we are growing, we're deregulating, and come and join us. The U.S. is going to host the G20 meeting next year, and on the finance track, we have identified the greatest financial risk as a lack of growth, because post-COVID, every government balance sheet has ballooned, and we have this gigantic government debt. There are two ways you can either cut your way out of it through austerity, no voter wants that, or you can grow your way out of it. So we are inviting the world, come grow with us, prosper with us, and we can all do it together.
Secretary, thank you very much.
Good.
U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, thank you so much.
Thanks, Maria.
By your commentary around words and the importance of words, and that being something that demarcates human animals from other animals, although that's debatable, that there's other language there. So in the context of Davos and the range of people we have here from technology, from the business world, from politicians, how would you like to see, what is the answer that you have in terms of this slightly dystopian world you've potentially put in front of us? And if I may just add to that, I think it's fair to say I'm a scientist by background, a neuroscientist, so I work a lot in this space, particularly around pain. And we're very comfortable with the fact that many of our discoveries, particularly technological discoveries, we often drive them forward, and then afterwards we think, oh, we hadn't thought enough about the ethics and the implications, and then we're trying to catch up on the regulation that we need to maybe put around it. So we are where we are. This thing is happening, as everybody says, at scale, both in terms of its magnitude and its pace, more than we've ever seen before in the Industrial Revolution. We have all the right blend of people here in Davos. It's all about dialogue. What would you like to see go forward in terms of putting boundaries around some of the slightly more worrying areas that you detailed? And what are your own thoughts about the ethical implications of giving legal rights to either agents, to robots, or to the ones that just exist on the internet?
A lot of things there. I mean, first of all, I would say that, Davos is about words. It's about talking. The basic idea of Davos is that you can change the world just by talking, which I like this idea, because this is also my idea as an author, as a university lecturer. This is what I do. I talk, I write. I think I can influence the world with words. And this is now in question. Are we at the end of the road for words? Is this no longer functioning? And, engineers and also soldiers, they don't change the world with words. They do stuff. They take action. Philosophers, scholars, also political leaders, they try to change the world with words, by saying things. And maybe we've reached the end of that road. And what does it mean? That, we humans, we conquer the world ultimately, I would say, with language and words. Because yes, engineers can make weapons and soldiers can wield them, but to build an army, you need to convince thousands of strangers to cooperate. How do you do that? With words, with ideology, with religion. So humans took over the world not because we are the strongest physically, but because we discovered how to use words to get thousands and millions and billions of strangers to cooperate. This was our superpower. And now something has emerged that is going to take our superpower from us. Until a few years ago, nothing on Earth could use words. Only humans. Chimpanzees couldn't, rivers couldn't, the sun couldn't. We could use words. Now there is something that is able, or soon will be able to use words better than us. And you look just, at what happened on social media and the immense change it brought to the world there. So 10 years from now, living in a world in which AIs are in command of language, how does that look like?
Well, Davos in 10 years might look very different, as you say, so that's a future we can all try to think about in the context of who would be here beyond the physical human. But if I may just discuss a little bit around the fact that it's not new for humans to be beaten by technology. So if we think about some of the we can't fly, and we built aeroplanes. Cars can go faster than us. We're very comfortable with that. The threat that comes with AI is the fact that it's a threat to the sovereign power of our ability to think. And that is destabilizing. I say that as an academic and an educator. That's something that is very threatening. But if we go back to, say, a robot, the value we would place on a robot being able to run the 100 meters faster than Usain Bolt is less. There's something about the human endeavor, the struggle, the suffering, the fact that we can have a collective sense of empathy and understanding about what it meant to achieve something, even if it was lesser with technology. I just wonder whether an author that would replace you, how much as a human we would value that, the words of that, the creativity that comes from art that's been done with artificial intelligence. Do you think we will value it as much, and therefore there's still a place for humans in the creative space of thinking and words?
That's the identity crisis, because Descartes didn't say, I run, therefore I am. I think, based human identity on our capacity to think. We always knew that cheetahs can run faster than us. We always knew that elephants are much bigger and stronger than us. So we didn't define ourselves by this, we defined ourselves by thinking. And now something is going to be better than us in thinking, if thinking means putting words in order. Now, I'm an author, I'm a speaker, I put words in order. This is my game. Like I have all these words, and I put, let's put these words in this order. No. It will be better to put it like this, like this, like this. And AI will beat me. I don't know how long it will take, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. It will beat me. And then what does it mean for our identity? People identify, with the streams of words in their mind. Like you close your eyes, you try to see what's happening inside me. Many people, I'm one of them, we see words popping up, organizing themselves. We identify with that.
But I guess my point is, using the same analogy, is that we still value a human. We have the Olympics. We've got the Winter Olympics coming. We know that many other animals and other technologies can outperform in many of those areas, yet we still really enjoy the humanity of people that train and develop, even though it's not as good. And I just wonder whether we will just naturally extend that to the thinking realm and to the words, so that you still will have a very, very vibrant and successful author role in 10 years' time. And
I don't know,
because I will value your book more than an AI-generated book.
Even if the AI comes up with new ideas better than me, like let's say that you want to invest money, and you ask a human consultant, and she comes up with a certain whatever, and you can empathize with her because she had this life story and whatever, and then you have the AI financial consultant with zero life story, zero emotions, but better financial advice. Which one will you follow? Now, we always have this kind of, I think, the big mistake, and this is why I started with the idea of agency. We always think that we can just use these things as tools. But if they can think, they are agents. Maybe I'll tell a story from medieval history. That how did the Anglo-Saxons took over Britain? And it's part myth, part history. That, the Britons who lived there originally, they were fighting with the Picts and the Scots coming from the north. And the Britons didn't fight very well. So the king of the Britons, Vortigern, he said, I have an idea. I've heard that in Germany, in Scandinavia, these people really know how to fight. So let's bring over some mercenary, some Anglo-Saxon mercenary. They will fight for us. They will defeat the Picts and the Scots. And Vortigern brings over Anglo-Saxon mercenaries, and they fight well, and they defeat the Scots and the Picts. But then the Anglo-Saxons say to themselves, this is a rich country. And these people, they are very weak. And these people, they are disunited. We can take over. And they take over. We understand this with human mercenaries. We understand that when you bring a human mercenary, okay, you pay them, but they have a mind of their own, maybe they rebel. We don't get it with AIs. You look at the leader of the world, they think, oh, I'll bring AI to fight my war for me. The idea that it can just take power away from you, it doesn't really cross their minds. They don't really accept that AIs can think.
Yeah, and that is very fundamentally different. So just to reverse that, you're an alum of my institution, and we're proud of that, although you're working at the other place now in Cambridge. So the challenge, I think, for the education sector, and it goes back to a reverse flip of what Alan Turing said, which was whether a computer could think, the sort of birthplace of artificial intelligence, if you will. So I think the question we've been posing inside the academic sector is, how do we keep humans thinking? Because if we keep abdicating our decision-making, our financial decisions, or whatever it might be, increasingly to AI, the worry we have quite quickly, and we're seeing this with students coming to us through the school system, very overusing ChatGPT, is the de-skilling of critical faculties of human brain thinking. So what's your advice to me in the academic sector about how can we hang in there as humans and keep humans thinking so that we at least have some capacity to live alongside these technologies, which, as you say, bring us into a very different place going forward in terms of world order?
You know, at the present moment, we still think better. So at the present moment, it's kind of telling people, you need your critical thinking, you need moral evaluations, you cannot get that from AI. But we need to prepare to the moment when this is no longer the case. We need to prepare for the moment, let's say again, take economics or finance, when AIs create a new financial system that they understand and we don't understand. How do you train economists or politicians in a world in which humans really can no longer understand how finance functions? Because AIs have created this super complex financial system that we are like the horses, you know, that horses can see that they are being traded from one human to another for a few shiny gold coins. They can't understand this idea of money, too complicated. We can be in the same situation 10 years from now, Davos 10 years from now. Maybe nobody in the room, no human in the room, understands the financial system anymore because it's dominated by AIs, and the AIs have come up with new financial strategies and devices that are just mathematically beyond the human capacity of the brain. So how does politics and finance and Davos look like in a world when no human beings understands finance anymore?
Yeah, no, well, that's a beautiful note to finish on. We've run out of time. There are many more questions that we could explore, one of which just being the major difference that we know about artificial intelligence compared to human intelligence is, of course, the human brain develops from birth to adulthood around age 20. And it is a product of your life experience as a sentient human being, feeling, loving, anger, these emotions. And whilst one can improvise a little bit with sensory detectors, and you can train the brain to do that. That is fundamentally different. So the artificial brain is not a human brain. It is not human. And there is maybe something that is still of value there that goes back to that core business of this sentient human being that brings value to our understanding.
And maybe one last comment.
Please.
Think about educating kids in a world where from day zero, maybe the most of the interaction of the new child is with an AI and not with a human being. It's the biggest and scariest psychological experiment in history, and we are conducting it.
Indeed, we are. Well, Yuval, thank you so much. I'm delighted that you're thinking about these problems and that you've got us all thinking this afternoon. I look forward to you coming back maybe to Davos in 10 years and reflecting on this conversation and just where we have got to. But thank you all to the audience, those of you online and those in the group. And thank you. Can we give a round of applause to Yuval?
It's one-time training, and then you deploy it, and it may or may not make a mistake. So here are a few really important things that I think we need to solve in order to get to the next intelligence. So the first of all, continual learning. So, like 101, machine learning 101 is that you separate out training from testing. It's almost a sin to mix the two. But human intelligence is not like that. From the day one a baby is born, it's in the deployment mode. It has to, figure things out. It's real life. So humans can learn during the deployment time, and we need to somehow figure out how to ensure AI can learn continuously during the test time. So it's test time training that I'm working on. Another angle that's really important is that currently, one of the key reasons in my mind why AI is unreliable sometimes, and we need to worry about the safety concerns as well. That for example, paperclip, scenario where you ask LLMs to generate as many paperclips as possible, it might kill all of us in order to produce one more paperclip, right? So in order to avoid that kind of a silly situation that's harmful for humans, AI should really figure out how the world works for the sake of learning how the world works, as opposed to just passively learning whatever data that's even given to us. So I think a fundamental challenge here is that LLMs learn passively as opposed to proactively. It's not really thinking for itself. It's just trying to memorize all the text given to us and then try to solve all the math problems given to us, as opposed to us humans being curious about how the world works and trying to think for ourselves. And then lastly, it's way too data dependent. Wherever data is rich, it works. Wherever data is not rich, it doesn't work. That's how things are right now. And then safety is hard because we have to create all the safety data. And red teaming, jailbreaks, these are not area of domain where there's a lot of data. So in order to fix this problem, I think we need an entirely different learning paradigm where it's really about thinking for itself, almost trading off data with compute. So, learning with way less data, but with more mental efforts.
Quickly, Yijing, but if you have continual learning, doesn't that open up a whole new spectrum of problems? Like right now, you build a model, you run a bunch of tests, eventually you refine it. A few months later, you do it again. If it's continuously learning, how does that not become just suddenly infinite, right? I mean, if you are learning from every answer and you're giving feedback, and like a baby's like in its crib, it's walking around, it's contained, but if you have, a few billion people using a model at any time and it's learning constantly, doesn't that open up whole new vectors of wonder, but whole new vectors of problems?
Yes and no. So it could, in theory, in a long term, but it's just so far off in my mind, in the sense that humans can also continually learn, but there's a limit as to how much we can really reach.
But another problem is that after the system has evolved sufficiently through this continual learning, all the safety tests that we did previously may not be valid anymore. So I think there's a real safety risk that you're pointing to.
Yes, so my hope is that if AI is trained correctly from day one, so that it really understands human norms and values, not just math problem solving, but human norms and values, such that it will build its worldview and everything else on top of it, and then it's going to behave based on that.
And how do you deal with reward hacking? In other words, even if it understands human values, it might have optimized something that is not quite what we want.
I agree.
We know what that gives, right?
So reward hacking implies that we just go with the reinforcement learning and that's all we got. No, it shouldn't be all we got. No human being is optimizing for one reward for the rest of their life, right? Like we have so many different goals that are at us, and we make some sacrifice. I might want to do something, but I might not do it because I respect other people, right? So AI should be exactly this, that they should understand that values are at us in real life, in human life, and that it needs to know how to make the trade-offs such that it's going to not violate laws, it's not going to harm people, And whenever it's not clear what to do, because there are always situations in which it's not clear what the gold answer is, it should consult with the humans and release the decision-making to humans.
All right, but we're going to move to Eric. Eric, you have recently built a big new model, K2 Think. You've had a whole series of innovations in it. Explain what you've done that's novel and what's different from the amazing stuff that Yijing and Joshua are working on.
Well, I have dirt my boot. So yeah, as Nick just mentioned, we at MBCI are among the few, maybe the only university that is actually building those foundation models from scratch. From scratch meaning that you gather your own data, you implement your own algorithm, you build your own machine, and then you train from top to bottom, and then you release and serve the whole process. I thought that it's important for academic to be a player like this so that we can share the knowledge to the public so that people can study many of the nuances in building this and also understand the safety and the risky issue better. In fact, I want to say that it is by no means easy. It's very, very difficult. In fact, I almost want to say that AI systems and the softwares are actually very vulnerable. They are not very robust, and they are not very powerful. You remove one machine from the cluster, you can crash the whole thing already. Now, what I'm building right now is, of course, to improve AI performance. But I want to maybe add on your question a comment on what do we mean by intelligence and how to break it down. Because if I tell my engineer, say, hey, build a software that is intelligent, they don't know what to do. So many people have different opinions on intelligence. There are Nobel Prize winners, in economy who may not do very well in their stock inspection. Their wife may do better than them. That's actually reflecting on a different level of intelligence and different utilities. In my opinion, what LM right now is delivering is a limited form of intelligence. I would call them maybe textual intelligence or maybe visual intelligence, which is actually on a piece of paper in the form of language or maybe video. But these are like book knowledge. If you want to put it on action, I was actually hiking a week ago in the Austria Alps. I do the GPTs, I do the Google, I got all the guides and even a Google map in my hand. When I walk to the mountain, you still cannot rely on paper. You have to rely on yourself. You have all these unexpected situations. Snow is too deep and the weather is no good and you cannot see the path anymore. What do? So this requires already a new type of intelligence that is not available right now in LM, which we call physical intelligence. And that's actually where people hear about the topic of word models. Word model is about understanding the world, able to generate plans and the strategies and the sequence of actions purposefully so that you can execute it and you can actually deploy it, and also you can adapt to changing environment. But still, this is not necessarily the smartest thing that we could imagine, because I would call the next level beyond physical intelligence would be social intelligence. Right now we don't actually see two LMs collaborating yet. They don't really understand each other in the form that we humans do. Right? There is no definition of a self. What is my limitation? What is your limitation? How can we divide the job into 2 or 100 so that we can break them into parts? Therefore, you can never ask LM or word model to help run a company or run a country because they don't understand these kind of nuances of interactive behaviors. I would put, in fact, also a last layer of intelligence that is still even further, which I would, for the sake of good name, I call them philosophical intelligence, which is that is LM or AI models itself curious to discover the world, to look for data and to learn things, and then to explain without being asked to explain. That's probably where Josh is very, very concerned about, because that's where you start to see definitively some sign of identity and agency. I want to say that we are not there yet. We are very far from there. Even the current physical model, the world model, is very primitive because it is primarily rely on a RAN architecture that is directly an offspring of the LM. So what my work is involving right now is to come up with new architectures which represents the data, do the reasoning, and also do the learning using different ideas. People may have heard about Yann LeCun's architecture of JEPA, right? It is an architecture behind many of the current world models. We have an alternative model called the JLP, which does the following. First of all, your representation of knowledge needs to be richer, need to be containing both continuous and symbolic signals so that you can reason at different level of granularity. And secondly, you need to have the right architecture, which can carry you a long way. People play with the Sora probably have that kind of experience. How many seconds of video can generate? Maybe 10 seconds, maybe a minute. It's not because they run out of memory. It's because going beyond 1 minute or 10 minutes, you don't have the ability to track consistency, to reason consistently. In fact, you can try a very interesting experiment. You just ask the Sora, or maybe Gemini, to generate you 360 degree of a round view around you, and then turn back to your degree 0. Did you see the same thing or not? It is not guaranteed. That's actually a lack of consistency already in the system. And then stateful representations, and also there are things like a continuous learning paradigm is a problem. Right now, all models are in the form of what we call passive learning. You feed the data, and then the model will be trained on those data. In machine learning, we knew in the past a new paradigm called active learning or proactive learning, where the system should hopefully be able to identify where they want to learn more, by asking for more data. But we are not yet there, not alone, go out and looking for data and create data themselves. So I think AI, as of now, in my opinion, still is a very primitive age. We have a lot to do to really get it to work.
Well, this is the handsome man at the end of the panels. You all know Harar. You probably already know that. Welcome. How are you? He's late for the same reason that everything is complicated in Davos, which is geopolitics. Apparently Macron went late. It pushed his panel back. So here we are. Yuval, what we've been talking about is different paths, new research that Joshua's been doing, that Yijin's been doing. You just walked in on what Eric has been doing. Lots of different promising ways to make AI go faster. I'm going to just ask you a philosophical question, which is, do you think that as we look for new models of AI, we should be trying to make it more like the human mind or less like the human mind? This is something you've written about beautifully, but I haven't heard you talk about this in the last while.
Mm-hmm. No, I think it's completely different from the human mind. The whole question of when will AI reach the same level of human intelligence, this is ridiculous. It's like asking, when will airplanes finally be like birds? They will never, ever be like birds.
And they shouldn't be.
And they shouldn't be. And they can do many, many things that birds can't. And this will be the same with AIs and humans. They are not on the same trajectory behind us. They're on a completely different trajectory, for better or for worse. I'm very happy to hear that it is still, that AIs, I'm not sure to what extent we can rely on it, how long it will continue. But the fact that AIs, for instance, cannot cooperate so far, this is wonderful news. I hope it's true. I hope it will remain like that. Otherwise, we are in very, very deep trouble. For me, the lesson from history about intelligence, you don't need a lot of intelligence to change the world and potentially to cause havoc. You can change the world with relatively little intelligence. And the other thing we've learned from human history about intelligence, I'm not referring to anybody in particular. And the other thing we've learned about intelligence is that the most intelligent entities on the planet can also be the most deluded. Human beings are by far, so far, the most intelligent entities on the planet and the most deluded. We believe ridiculous things that no chimpanzee or dog or pig would ever dream of believing. Like that if you go and kill other people of your species, after you die, you go to heaven, and there live blissfully ever after because of the wonderful thing you did, that you killed these other members of your species. No chimpanzee will believe that, but many humans do, at least where I come from. And you can, again, when I say that you can change the world with relatively little intelligence, humans have already done much of the hard work for the AIs. Like if you drop an AI in the middle of the African savannah and tell it, take over the world, it can't. How will it do it? Impossible. But if first you have these apes who build all these bureaucratic systems, like the financial system, and then you drop the AI into the existing financial system, and you tell it, okay, now take this over, that's much, much easier. The financial system, you don't need motor skills. You don't need even to understand the world. An AI can understand. The financial system is the ideal playground for AI. It's a purely informational, like to train AIs to make $1 million. Create 1 million AIs, give them some seed money, let's see you make $1 million. Now, if you have a few AIs that succeeded in doing that, replicate them. What happens to the world if more and more of the financial system is shaped by AIs that developed better, even though they can't walk down the street, they know how to invest money better than humans. It's a very, very limited intelligence. But again, think about social media. Social media is run to some extent by extremely primitive AIs, these algorithms that control our news feeds and so forth. Look what they did in 10 years. We created a human system, media, and then we introduced the AIs into our system, and it's an informational system, and they took it over, and they, to a large extent, wrecked the world. They are not the only reason for the mess now in the world, but if you think about what extremely primitive AIs did within the human-created system of media, then...
Well, I'm gonna move this to Joshua, because he, in fact, has invented AIs, or is working on inventing AIs, that if dropped into the financial system and told to wreck it, would not be able to, correct? That's the hope. Respond to Yuval.
I want to add something, going back to your first question, connecting humans and AIs, and whether we should build AIs at our image.
Yeah.
And indeed, they're quite different from us. The problem is we interact with them, many people interact with them with the false belief that they are like us. And the smarter we make them, the more it's going to be like this. And there will be people who want to make them even look like us. So it's going to be video first, eventually maybe physical form. But it's not clear that it's good in many ways in terms of how humanity has developed norms and expectations and psychology that work because we interact with other humans. But AIs are not really humans. For example, they could be immortal, right? Once an AI is created, in principle, you could just copy it on more computers, and we can't do that with our brain, as Jeff Hinton has been highlighting many times. And many other differences, like they can communicate with each other 1 billion times faster than we can do between each with ourselves. And so there's going to be this illusion that we build machines that are like us, but they're not. And this is a dangerous illusion that could lead us to take wrong decisions. Part of the problem is the scientists themselves. Like in the last 40 years that I've been working on AI, in the whole community, really we took inspiration from human intelligence, right? Like you were talking about continual learning because we're good at that, and we see that it's lacking in AI. And that's fine, that's how research has been moving. But I think we also have to think of what's going to happen when this gets to be deployed in society more and more, and people will anthropomorphize and do weird things.
It's an amazing question. Let's move this to a topic that I think connects to this pretty well, which is back to the architectural questions or foundation questions, which is the question of open source. And there's actually been more and more discussion here in Davos, in part because Europe is recognizing they need a counterweight to the USAA models. Eric, you're building open source models. Yijing, you have strong views on them. Joshua, you have strong views on them. Yijing, why don't we start with you? What do you think of the notion that it would be good if there were many more open source models that we all started to use as much as we use the large foundation models?
Yeah, so the way that I like to think about open source is democratization of generative AI, which is a powerful, powerful tool. And what I mean by democratization of generative AI is that AI should be of human, for human, by humans. AI is of human because it's really drawing from the internet data. That's the artifact of human intelligence. It reflects our values. It reflects our knowledge. By the way, values including horrible value, that we do to each other. It happens to be on the internet, and so AI picks up on that. There are sci-fi movies in which AI kills us all, and as a result, that's what AI might actually say because it's written on the internet. AI should be for humans in that humanity at large and all of the humans, not just some humans who happen to be in power. I deeply care about this, that AI should be really for all humans. And by the way, worse than AI for some humans is AI for humans, or humans for AI, even worse. It's really good to think about how we build and design AI so that we work on problems that could really make humanity better, as opposed to just increase the subscriptions and win the leaderboard. And then lastly, AI by humans. What I mean by that is that AI should be created. AI should be able to create it by different countries and different, not just the private sectors, but public sectors and non-profit org and even academia. The reason why I think about this way is that, well, I'm US citizen now, but I used to be a Korean person. And it's a very wonderful thing if we know how to create this even from Korea or from other countries, as opposed to them having to just rely on a country or two providing all the services for them.
But would your goals be satisfied if Korea had a closed foundation model, or do you want there to be a universal open model that everybody is able to contribute to? Eric, you agree with this?
People can choose to close or open, but the reason why, for the time being, I really support open source is because it takes too much of resources to build something really, really good, fast. And so unless you're capable of, really making very large data centers and own lots of GPUs really fast, it really helps to help each other to share the scientific knowledge and everything so that the development goes much faster. And by doing so, by the way, we can make small models much more powerful so that a lot of organizations who cannot afford as much can build LLMs that serve just their needs, not like general LLMs that can do everything, but something that really serves a business need really well.
Right, Eric, so you nodded at one point and shook your head at another point, so I need you to respond quickly here.
Yeah, I think open source, isn't really the goal. It is basically, a philosophy or a way of doing things which come very naturally with science, with any of the scientific research.
But what do you mean it's not the goal? Like it's not like you're not doing it for the sake of open source. You're doing it because it's a more efficient way to reach the outcome.
No. It is really almost like a responsibility or a natural style of doing the research of AI. In fact, there are also pragmatic values. For example, I often ask, do you prefer there is only one car maker in the world that makes you feel safer, or you actually see 10 or 100 is better? Right? Open source basically is about sharing knowledge to the general public so that people can use it. Also, people can study it and understand it and improve it. Of course, the assumption is that this technology, is not an evil. Okay, it's not something that you really want to get rid of. I don't think technology itself, by definition, any technology is evil. It's really about the people who use it in the wrong way. But by closing sourcing it, you don't actually stop that. So open sourcing, over the benefit from open sourcing, in my opinion, overweights closing it because, first of all, you cannot stop the way of using it. And secondly, by opening it, you actually, are promoting more adoption and more understanding of that. I also want to go back to the issue that Josh just mentioned about the impersonalization of human AI technology creates the risk. Well, that is how we see it now. It's kind of also implicitly assuming that the way human beings do not learn from the new experiences. In the past, if you look at the history, there are many magical inventions which may make certain population godlike. But then after some time, people actually get comfortable with it and start to form better judgment and also better understanding. I think the way of really making people safe and comfortable and coexistent nicely with AI is to use more AI and also get quickly adapt to it. It's like you are in a natural environment, you have the virus and so forth. Of course, you want to think about stopping it, but sometimes the nature chooses to let you coexist with the virus so that you become stronger. There are some risk, some casualty, but as a population, as a society, we together evolve stronger.
Joshua, and then I have a question for you,
So
Paul.
as a university professor, I've been promoting open source and of course open science for all my life. But if you start asking ethical questions, then at some point you start hitting a problem, which is some knowledge can be dangerous when it is available to everyone. So I'm going to give you a simple example. Biologists are working on how to create new DNA sequences that can actually create new viruses that don't exist. And if you know a sequence that gives rise to a virus that could kill half of the planet, should you publish it? And the answer should be obvious in this case, right? So current AI systems that are open sourced are net positive. It helps safety. It helps democratization of AI. And I'm as worried as you are about concentration of power. I'll come back to that. The problem is, if the capabilities of AI continue to grow along the directions that we've been talking about, at some point we end up with AI systems that are like, well, not the sequence itself, but the machine that can generate the sequence that can kill half of the population. So when AI reaches that stage, we should not just, give it to everyone, because there are a lot of crazy people. There are dangerous people. There are people who want to use it, for destroying their enemies in military ways. So we should be very careful when we reach a level of capability where AI can be weaponized. Now, I agree about the issue of concentration of power, but there are other ways than open sources. When we get to that point where AI can be weaponized, I think, and before we get there, we need to think about it, we should really think of how we can manage a few, not just one, a few AI systems that will be dangerous in the wrong hands, and where the power to control these things will be decentralized, right? So what we don't want is one entity, one government, one corporation to dictate, what the world should be. But I think that there are solutions to this, and we have experienced this sort of thing in the international arena with international treaties, what we've done with nuclear weapons, what Europe has done with the EU, and so on. So I think that there are solutions, and we should think about ways to both avoid catastrophic use and abuse of power in the hands of just a few.
This is I want to bring in Yuval here, because this is an amazing philosophical question, right? There's incredibly powerful technology. Are we safer if everybody's contributing to it and everybody has a say over it, but everybody kind of has access to it? Or are we safer if a relatively small number of people who can be controlled are answerable to governments and are all here in somewhere in the Congress Center have control of it? Have we ever faced this historically, Yuval? Has there ever been a moment like this? And what happened?
Okay, sorry.
I think the main point is that we just don't know. We are at a point when we are conducting this huge historical experiment, and we just don't know. The key question for me, how do we build a self-correcting mechanism into it? How do we make sure that if we get the answer wrong, we'll have a second chance? And the model for me is the last big technological revolution, which is the Industrial Revolution. When the Industrial Revolution begins in the early 19th century, nobody has an idea how to build a benign, a good industrial society. This immense new power, steam engines, railroads, steamships, how do you use them for good? And different people have different ideas, and they experiment. And European imperialism was one experiment. Some people say the only way to build an industrial society is to build an empire. You cannot build an industrial society on the level of one country, because you must control the raw material and the markets. You must have an empire. Then you have people who say it must be a totalitarian society. Only a totalitarian system, like Bolshevism or like Nazism, the immense powers of industry can only be controlled by a totalitarian society. Now, looking back from the early 21st century, we can say, oh, we know what the answer was. We think we know. It took 200 years of terrible wars and hundreds of millions of casualties and injuries that are not healed even today to find out how to build a benign industrial society. And this was just steam engines. Now we are dealing with potentially super intelligent agents. Nobody has any experience with building a hybrid human-AI society. We should be a lot more humble in the way that we think we know how to build it. No, we don't. How do we make sure? I don't know what the answer. The question is, how do we build a self-correcting mechanism so if we take the wrong bet, this is not the end?
I want to bring the conversation from philosophical back to more like a practical part, because it's about where the checkpoint should be, right? You talk about a dangerous virus. Synthesizing a virus is actually not easy. The idea of a nuclear bomb, for example, is published somewhere. You can Google it. You cannot build it because you need to get the materials. You need to get the labs. There are a lot of checking points already. We learned from generations and centuries of governance and regulation and human practices were set in many places already. After all, AI is a piece of software. It is software living in the computers. And when it does the physical harm, it needs to go out of the computer. That's already one extra checkpoint.
Humans can do it for the AI, and eventually there will be robots that will do it.
And humans are subject to checkpoints as well, right? But virus, on the other hand, does not.
But let me, Eric, let me ask you this: since this panel is all about like how to best construct the next generation of AI, probably all agree here on this panel that we want lots of checkpoints and good checkpoints. We maybe disagree on whether we have enough right now. What is the sort of methodology or architecture of AI that has the most checkpoints? Yijin, you got one right there?
Yeah, I have a proposal to handle this situation better. I think fundamentally the problem is that AI is too dumb. It's going to learn on any data that you give to it, and if you happen to give data about how to do cyber attacks or how to generate bioweapons, it's just go ahead and learn from it, right? That's the fundamental challenge we're dealing with. On the other hand, if we build AI, maybe following Yosha's AI scientist direction, that really learns, think for itself, and really acquire human norms, understand that that's what it should really abide by. And then when it reads the training data given by some other human, it refuses to learn. When it knows that this is illegal, it refuses to learn. And by the way, that's what humans also do. Like a lot of us, of course there are people who want to do bad things, but a lot of us, if I give you how to kill humans, through bioweapons, would you, internalize it for yourself? No, because you don't want to act on it. So I think we may need to rethink about how we design AI training algorithms such that it has more agency about how to choose what to learn.
So to just not train on Reddit at all.
Yasha, I just want to mention that because we've been talking about the technical aspects of these questions. Right now, the way we design AI systems, there is no boundary between data and instruction. So in normal programming, it's two different things, right? So a program will read files, and then there's the code itself, and the programmers write the code, and they know that whatever is in the files, the behavior is going to be according to the code. With the way that we're building our AIs, there's no distinction. And so that's the reason why it's so easy to, in the data, put instructions. That's how you get jailbreaks, right? And other security issues that we have with AIs. And so I think that in order to get more safety from the AIs, we need them to understand the distinction between what we want and what is instructed in a way that's been socially kind of regulated. So who decides what the norms are and so on. And what it reads as data, when it has an interaction with a user, we don't want the user to be able to make the AI do anything that they want, for example.
So is that like a set of master controls you're trying to build?
No,
is that like a...
No. So in the scientist AI, the way that we're doing this is we're training the AI to make the difference between what people will say, will write, which could be motivated, which the AI should not take as truth or what it should be necessarily doing, and other forms of information which contains underlying truths or underlying causes of what is being seen. And that second channel is one that is trustworthy, where we don't necessarily give that access to anybody using the AI, for example. But it's also a way to make sure we get AIs that understand the difference between what people will say and what is actually the cause of what they say, and if what they say is true, so they get honesty.
So we have just a few minutes left. We've talked about a lot of new architectures. We've talked about some new agentic systems. We've talked a lot about open source. We've talked about continual learning. We've talked about different ways of looking at data. And we've kind of talked about all the new systems as though they're good. Are there any sort of new architectures or methodologies that people are excited about, maybe ones that we've talked about on stage, that you think are actively bad and that we should not pursue? Maybe Eric and Yijin?
What do you mean by a bad architecture? Is that the consequences are bad or the performance are bad?
Either works fine.
I think, in fact, maybe that is even compatible with what Josh is worried about. Building a system that is not in a closed loop fashion, that you purely do thought experiments and embedding internally in some kind of latent representations and complete all the training before emerging to the real world to validate, in my opinion, is a bad system. Mm-hmm. Because first of all, performance-wise, there isn't really enough checkpoints to even control and visualize or understand any of the risky points. And also, it is very hard to connect a system to a action conditioning point so that you can steer it, you can navigate, you can manipulate. On the other hand, it is going to consume, data and energy and the resource and the money, for too long before you actually see the end outcome. I'm not going to name any specific instance of this architecture, but it's actually pretty prevalent that people sometimes believe that I don't need to really, compare, the content from AI system with real-world data constantly before, I achieve superintelligence. And secondly, I also think the current learning paradigm, which I totally agree with Josh and Yejing about, is a very, very primitive and maybe a unproductive one. The data, right now, is really, the master of the algorithm and of the system. And the system itself is basically a one-shot learning in a sense. You train it, and then when now I'm using GPTs or any models, they don't actually learn from that experiences. And just like ourselves, when we're in the conversation, I'm already learning from both of you and all of you, new points. I enjoy that. And the AI system isn't built for that kind of functionality yet. And can you imagine that a system of that kind of dumbness can become super intelligent and come back and go after us? I just don't feel the dots can connect. Yeah. It doesn't have that kind of a task-oriented type of data that guides you, beyond just pattern matching, but actually do the reasoning and so forth. So if our goal is to build smarter and more powerful system, there are needs to explore new architectures. Of course, there is a separate issue about how do we measure the risk. I don't really know the exact answer, but I want to actually hear, Josh, your opinion. Is the solution to not doing that, or do that with a very, very conscious and quantitative kind of approach to measure the risk, to experiment with all the scenarios?
Great. We're almost out of time, Joshua, very quickly.
Yes, we need to measure the risk on the fly, not just once when we evaluate those models. And we need to make sure that we also have the right societal infrastructure. So even if we knew how to build really safe systems, there are lots of bad things that can happen because humans are humans. And so, we need technical guardrails and we need societal guardrails.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, let's wrap this up. Yuval, your book came out, Nexus came out about 1.5 years ago. You had some real concerns about AI. You've just been here with 3 of the smartest, most influential AI researchers in the world. They've won every prize imaginable. Do you feel like we're getting onto the right track, or do you not?
I think we are thinking on different time scales. That when people, a lot of the conversations in Davos, when they think, when they say long term, they mean like 2 years. When I say long term, I mean like 200 years. It's like, again, it's an industrial revolution. The first commercial railway has been opened between Manchester and Liverpool in 1830. This is now 1834, 1835. And we are having this discussion. People say, the industrial revolution is moving so slowly. They told us that railways and steam engines will change the world. So what? So a few people are going between Manchester and Liverpool. Didn't change anything. This is all science fiction. Because the time scale, that we have no idea, even if all progress in AI stops today, the stone have been thrown into the pool, but it just hit the water. We have no idea what are the waves created even by the AIs that already have been deployed, say, a year or two ago. Social consequences are a completely different thing. You cannot run history in a laboratory and see what are the social consequences of invention. You can test for accidents. You create the first steam engine, you can test for accidents. You cannot test what will be the geopolitical implications or the cultural implications of steam engine in a laboratory. It's the same with AI. So it's just far too soon to know, and I'm mainly concerned about the lack of concern. That we are creating, we are deploying maybe the most powerful technology in human history, and a lot of very smart and powerful people are worried about, what will the investors say in the next quarterly report. They think in terms of a few months or a year or two.
Joshua, just quickly, I want to thank Yuval Harari because he's talking about lack of concern, and I've started a new organization, a nonprofit, that's trying to implement the scientist AI, and Yuval has graciously accepted to be on the board. We need people like him to look with an independent oversight on what we'll be doing with AI with society in the coming years.
All right, time scale, 00000. Thank you so much. This was an amazing panel. You're all absolutely wonderful. Thank you for the work you do, and thank you for participating here.
Thank you.
move quicker, fast, to two things. One is energy transition, which I think is the most important thing that the planet needs today, is to move away from fossil fuels and go into renewable energy, and to do it properly and to do it with business cases, to do a business case of renewable energy. And secondly, I think circular economy. I think these are the two messages I really want to leave here to all the audience. No more linear economy, no more plastics over the world. No, I mean, we can do better. We have all the technology to have full circular economy of the plastics of Pepsi Cola, of the plastics of everybody, and energy transition. These are the two things. Now, for energy transition, I think storage is one of the main problems that we have, at least in the developing world, the storage and the grid. How do we modernize these two to make sure that we take advantage of solar, wind, geothermics? But these are the two things I will fully recommend. Energy transition in a full scale, in a big scale, and circular economy.
Thank you very much, Alicia. The forum is publishing some information on circularity and circular economies. Don't hesitate to pick up the reports and read them. There's some very interesting work being done here.
Yeah, I'll say, and obviously there's a lot of things we can do, but I was listening to you, Andrew, and we have examples as well. To me, is how do we take these examples and we make them fast at scale? Like what's preventing your competitors from doing the same? I don't know. Sometimes it's sharing. Sometimes we are too selfish as companies and we keep it to ourselves. We think it's a competitive advantage. I think there are things that we just need to eliminate the competitive nature and put it at the benefit of the whole system, right? So I think we have enough examples. Like I know we have enough examples in agriculture. We have the business case. We know the model. We know how to scale it. It just doesn't happen enough. So how do we cooperate as a group? How do we become less selfish, more kind of team players? And then also with the governments, like we need to trust each other more. We need to, like public, private, or no, I think this is not where, we need to have tension between each other. It's an areas where we need to be able to share with you what works and then scale it through Mexico, right? And we know how it works. So I think there is a little bit of selfishness and competitiveness when I think this is not about being competitive. The truth is that we haven't found a way for consumers to prefer our brands because of sustainability. It's not a competitive nature. It's more of let's change the system, let's think for the long term, let's make sure that 20 years from now we have resilient companies that can still produce great products at the service of consumers, profitable to our shareholders, and great for the communities where we operate, which is the big value creation.
So if I can make a parallel with international companies, it's risk management with a payout in the long term. And that's not in the nature of the way we do business these days. Andrew, I'm sorry, we're running out of time, so I'm trying to speed up.
I'll only be a minute. Just to endorse what you said, and Madam Minister, thank you. I do want to bring this to Mexico. I do want to scale this. It is perfectly simple. The flat line of technology for fossil fuel means that it's going to get more expensive. Any economist, any business person knows that. The technology growth, particularly in batteries, but solar and wind, is near vertical, which means that its operating cost, its capital cost is falling. We apply that with what we didn't have only last year, and that's incredibly reactive artificial intelligence to manage very complex grids. Humans can't do it. A cloud goes over a solar farm, everything changes, but instantaneous intellect like AI can manage these systems well. This is replicable. This can be taken to Pepsi, it can be taken to Mexico. It's fair enough that they might say, well, prove it first. My own chief executive of energy and growth in the audience here wants us to prove it first. I just say, you can see the trend now. It's going to be successful. We'll prove it within 2 years, but follow us now and we'll make the technology available to you now.
Next stop, Mexico.
Next stop, Mexico.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Sumant,
yeah, look,
I have 45 seconds, just so that you know.
Yeah. Thank you. Look, I think that the best solution here is what Andrew alluded to, which is technology. Technology is going to take us in a direction that is going to make eventually clean energy so much cheaper than the alternative that there'll be such a strong commercial reason to implement it that nobody's going to go after fossil fuels any longer. And those people that are investing behind fossil fuels today will essentially have stranded assets and will get left behind. So I think the fundamental factor that I'm meeting so many exciting companies even here that are doing so much interesting and fantastic research and coming up with new technologies, whether it's on green hydrogen, whether it's in storage, whether it's in generating new solar and wind and other, fusion, for example. So there's a lot of exciting stuff that is happening. And I'm pretty convinced in my mind that in the next 5 to 7 years, we'll see totally new technologies coming out in the clean energy space that we cannot anticipate today. And those are the things that I think ultimately, if implemented at scale, which there is no reason for us not to, if they're commercially sensible, there'll be a ton of capital coming in behind it. I think that's going to be the solution. We'll essentially end up blowing, and I hate to say this, but the fossil fuel sort of system out of the water. But it's going to take a little bit of time, but it is going to happen.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that. Maybe if I can just finish this part of the panel by a call to action. Yes. I mentioned the dinosaur in the room before. Look at us. We are not enough convinced of the necessity of what's happening. You've heard it from science. You've heard it from our panelists. It is happening. And if you don't do something about it, we are going to be in trouble. Now, why are we so little people in the room? Because they're all somewhere else listening to people who are saying that the future is fossil fuels. It isn't. And I would really like people to go home knowing that. Number one.
Yes. Yes.
Secondly, I really would like to thank most sincerely my panel. You are outstanding, and you've done that very well. And together possible. Collaboration is better than domination, and we will get there onwards. And thank you to the Center for Nature and Climate of the World Economic Forum, who has put together not only this panel, but has done all the work during the year to support this. So thank you very much to everybody. Thank you for coming. Thank you.
Panel, I will introduce them to my left, of course, to your right. We have Ebba Busch, who is the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Energy, Business and Industry of Sweden. We have, next we have Olivier Blum, Chief Executive Officer of Schneider Electric from France, and also on the International Business Council. We have, let me see here, do I have right? René Haas, Chief CEO of ARM, United Kingdom, known to many of you chip aficionados in the room. We have Josh Payne, founder and CEO of Nscale, also here from the United Kingdom, and K.R. Schroeder, well known to those of you at Davos for the last 20 years as a startup founder. I still think of your company as a startup, even though you are now scaled up, and that, I know we'll hear more about it, K.R., but it was a celebrated startup from the first wave of clean tech 20 years ago, and really making your impact in the current wave of climate and energy tech now with AI. So we'll hear about that, I'm sure, from K.R. Schroeder of Bloom Energy from the United States. So give them a nice round of applause to welcome them to the stage. I thought we would start with you, Deputy Prime Minister, if we may. The road ahead, while there are tremendous transformative opportunities, there are challenges. And some of them do have to do with how we think about governance, how we think about market structure, sometimes boring, fiddly things. We generally organized things like energy to be safe and stable and not overly innovative. We wanted to just keep the lights on. Oftentimes, utilities are rewarded not for taking risks or investing in trying new technologies, but on the contrary. And so we've had also flat growth in electricity in Europe and America for a decade or more. And suddenly we're finding a period of tremendous growth in these developed markets. And of course, in developing countries, we have not only the prospect of data centers and AI, but air conditioning, electrification, economic growth. There's even bigger drivers as we're in this age of electricity in which we're rapidly accelerating into a super cycle. From a point of view as a policymaker, how do you look at this and what do you prioritize? How do you get the rules right?
In many ways, this is such a headache era for policymakers, because this is asking, but it's also, I mean, the best opportunity ever. In truly dark and challenging times, there's so much hope connected to this. But for me, this is asking for policymakers to become truly technology neutral. And we have shown again and again, and not least in the area of energy, that we love to be very ideologically driven, and sometimes putting even our faith in our own political rhetorics instead of seeing that, well, that will still be out-trumped by the basic laws of physics. So how to become truly technology neutral, and especially in terms of AI, how do you regulate and make a policy for something that is shape-shifting faster than a Pokemon? Is one thing today, it's going to be a completely different thing by the time the Swedes hop around the Swedish midsummer pole singing a little frog song. And that's just in 6 months' time, hopefully, and then the Swedes will get the sun back.
I'm planning a reconvening of this session up in Sweden for this.
Exactly.
By which point we would have solved all these problems.
Hopefully, but so that's the one on technology neutrality, because most democracies are not built for speed. We're built for stability, and the European Union, for